Hello, friends and partners. This is Brother Dale Begley. This is Faith Class number 9. Faith Class number 9. Today we're speaking on faith to obey, or faith to follow instructions. It is amazing how people will hear something, put their own version to it, and then think they've obeyed God. I've learned over the years, the closer you can get to what God says, the better off you are. Oral Roberts, his key to success was this: hear from God, number one. And you got to make sure it's God. It's not just you or something you want to do. Hear from God, confer not with flesh and blood. Don't let people talk you out of it. And then get your job done at any cost. And so we're going to jump in. This is Faith Class number 9. Get you a pencil, piece of paper, some notes, download it to your device, hear it over and over and over. Please share it with your friends. I'm going to start talking about we missed the supernatural by looking for the spectacular. God showed Elijah the wind, the fire, the earthquake. And he finally said, I'm not in that. I'm in the still, small voice. Faith comes from hearing, and hearing by the Word of God. We've been talking mostly about the written Word of God, the Logos, the written Word. But today we're going to talk about God speaking to you. The Word is speaking to you, but also the Holy Spirit also will speak to you. And so you've got to have enough faith in what God says to you. Start a church, buy a tent, become a partner, sow a seed, pay someone's electric bill, be planted in this church. All these things that you hear from God, if He should tell you that, then you need enough faith to obey what He says. And so we're going to just jump right in here. In 1 Kings, the 13th chapter, you'll find he's called a man of God. God sent him to Bethel to declare that the altar is going to be split in two, and the sacrifice ashes are going to run out on the ground. They had been offering human sacrifices. And so God sent this man of God over there, and He told him, simple instruction, simple, so simple, you have to have help to misunderstand it. He said, do not drink water, do not eat bread, and when you leave, go and depart and come home a different route, a different way. So he goes over there. He tells them what God said. The altar split. Ashes run down on the ground. And the king stretched forth his hand to stop him. And when he did, the king's hand froze and was paralyzed. Could have been leprosy. And then all of a sudden, this king changed his mind and said, oh, no, please, man of God, please pray for me. And the prophet prayed, and his hand was unfrozen. Now, they heard in the area of the success of what this prophet said, it came to pass. And so these sons went home to their dad and told him, and he was also an older prophet, how successful this young prophet was. So this old prophet comes up with a story and says, tell me where he went. So he goes find him under a tree. And he goes there and he says, are you that prophet? He said, yes, I'm that prophet. He said, well, an angel appeared unto me and told me you should come to my house and eat with me and so forth. Well, an angel is not going to contradict what the Lord had told him. But because this older prophet said, I'm a prophet too, he persuaded him. People can persuade you, and you can miss God. And so this young prophet goes home, eats with him. God rebukes him. I told you not to eat bread and water. He goes out, and a lion kills him. Well, with God, following instructions is extremely important. They may be simple, but they're important. God don't want you to add to, He don't want you to take away. Over the years, I've had several people work for us. We did tent ministry for 17 years and different types of ministry in church and so forth. And we'd have people working for us. And oftentimes, I'd just give them simple instructions. Do this, do this, do this. And I'd be off preaching in another city and come back, and they didn't do anything I told them to do. I asked, Lord, what is this? Well, most people think they have a better idea. But and that's pride. You have to humble yourself, how simple the instructions may be, do the instructions. Now, we're talking about, in the book of Romans, you talk about the steps of Abraham, the steps of the faith of Abraham. God leads you by faith, step by step by step. He don't tell you everything. When God told Abraham to take the first step, he said, leave your country and leave your kinfolks. Well, he left his country, but he brought his nephew Lot with him. So he didn't completely obey the Lord. But he started. In the book of Hebrews 11 chapter said, Abraham left not knowing. Not knowing. This is important. Think of that. He go gets a U-Haul trailer, backs it up to his house. He's leaving his country. He's leaving his kinfolk. Where you going, Abraham? I don't know. What are you going to do? I don't know. When you going to go? I don't know. Not knowing. Sometimes it's called blind faith. In other words, you obey what God told you to do, not knowing how it's going to come to pass, how he's going to pay for it. You not know it. You trust or have faith in the instructions. And so we're talking about the steps. The Bible says in the book of Psalm 37, the steps of a good man are ordered of the Lord. This is so important. The steps of a good man are ordered of the Lord, and he delighteth in his way. Also in Proverbs it says, the path of the righteous shines brighter and brighter and brighter. What does that mean? As you go, the more light you get. As you go, the more light you get. If you're waiting for God to tell you the full story, you'll never go. You'll never do. He just gives you enough to start, and then it's kind of like on a need-to-know basis. Several years ago, I had a Sunday off, and so I got cleaned up that morning. I knew the Lord wanted me to preach somewhere. I didn't know where. He didn't tell me where. So I get up and I drive to Atoka, and I'm at the red light, and I don't know which way to go. Well, it's fixed to turn green. You either got to go left, right, back up, turn around, do something. So I had an inkling to turn right. So I drove. And as I'm driving towards this small town, I have an open vision. And I see this rock wall. And I thought, that's kind of strange. And so I go to this little small town, and I don't know what church to go to. He didn't tell me. And so I drive around, and the thought came to me, go to that church down there you preached at years ago. So I went down there, and I'm early. I'm about an hour before service. I drive around the back and look, and there's a rock wall. I thought, I'm on target. Now, I went in there and preached. I said to the pastor, Pastor, how's your church? Oh, he said, brother, our finances are, he actually said, they're in the toilet. That's what he said. And he said, he asked me to preach. He said, I doubt if you'll get $50 this morning. Well, it wasn't about the money. I was just trying to obey God. Did you know that a priest had a good service? Over $1,000 came in. You see, the thing it is, someone said, well, I wish God would talk to me that way. Well, it's hard to steer a parked car. I had to get up, go, not knowing where I was going. And so there's steps to this. And as you learn how to take that first step, then here comes the more instruction, and then more instruction, and more instruction. I've got several stories I want to tell you this morning, so as testimonies. But I want you to see how an older prophet persuaded him and talked him out of the plan of God. I was in another city several years ago, and the Lord said, I want you to go to such and such town and be there Sunday morning. Well, I didn't call anybody. I didn't know who the pastor was. Didn't know if they had a pastor. Well, I just said, Lord, that's 150 miles over there, and I'm already 150 miles from home. But I just obeyed God, got up, went over there, got there early, and I walked to the door, and the man that was in charge, the pastor didn't have no pastor, the man in charge said, God said you had to preach, so I preached. Do you know that church tripled in size? And out of that one service, we got some partners, didn't ask them, they just joined us, and supported us faithfully for 30-something years. Well, if I hadn't obeyed God, this goes back to the story where God said to Elijah, go over there. If you stay here, your provision's not here, your provision's over there. And so I obeyed God, and there we received a partner over 30-some-odd years. I've got story after story after story I could tell you. Another one comes to mind. I was driving down the road in a little town in Indiana, and I drove by a car dealership. And the Lord said, you'll be preaching in there. And I thought, that's a Chevrolet dealership. What am I going to preach? Like a rock. Well, that's the commercial, you see. Well, I didn't know that they went out of business. Someone had rented the storefront part of that dealership, put up some curtains, called me on the phone. In 30 days, I was preaching in there. Now that revival there, we got partners last over 30 some odd years. 30 some odd years. Now, I'm in another city. This time I'm in my tent. I have a crew working for me, a tent crew. And at about, I don't know, 7 o'clock in the morning, a storm came through, blew the tent down. They called me about 7:30, 7:15. I jumped in my car and run over there. I got $80,000 worth of equipment laying on the ground. I it felt like my guts was wrenched. Well, I didn't know what to do. Notice that phrase. Abraham didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to do. The first 5 years of our ministry, you could have named us. He does not know what to do ministries. Tents on the ground, faith sitting on the ground. I heard right down here in my spirit. Now see, this is what I'm talking about. Faith to obey the spoken word. Whether it's the written word or he quickens the word. He said, you got a smaller tent in the truck. And I did. In other words, he wanted me to clean that up, put up the smaller tent, and go ahead and have revival. Well, we worked all day long getting the bigger tent out, got the small tent up, had service, never missed a service. We had a church join us there that supported us over 30 some odd years. Now, my point is this. Oftentimes our provision is on the end of our obedience. And if you don't have enough faith to step out and obey, the provision never comes. So today we're talking about faith to follow instructions. Simple instruction. Simple. Don't add to, don't take away. Another instance comes to mind. I was been on the road and traveling, preaching, came home, and I think it was a Wednesday night, I'm not sure. It could have been a Sunday night, but I was going to take off and just kind of rest. And I'd been out working, I was tired, and I sat down in my chair, and I heard the Lord said, he called a man's name, said, his healing is in your right hand. Well, I knew what he meant. I had to clean up, go to church. So I went to the church that night. Now, I'm not preaching. The pastor of the church was preaching. And this man that he called his name came up for prayer. He had kidney failure. He was taking dialysis. They didn't expect him to live just a couple of weeks. And make a long story short, the pastor got through preaching. He said, well, now, come up here and pray for this man. Which the man, God had told me his name. He said, his healing's in your right hand. I'll go for it and lay my right hand on him and pray for him. He lives 7 more years. Now, see, simple instructions. His healing's in your right hand. If I hadn't obeyed, now God's the healer, but he has to use somebody, and he needs people's obedience. And so we're talking about faith to follow instruction, faith to obey the still small voice. Now, in the book of Samuel, here's another incident where King Saul, the prophet came down and told him to go into Amalek, kill every dog, cat, cow, kill every child, kill everything. Why would God kill a whole group of people? In the Old Testament, their culture got so bad, even their animals become demon-possessed. The people were demon-possessed. There was no casting out devils, per se. There was no remedy for that. The book of Acts said there's things in the Old Testament that couldn't be rectified by the law. The law couldn't fix it. Only casting out the devil and the new verse would fix it. So he had to get rid of the whole community. Now, the prophet told him what to do. Kill Amalek. Kill everything. But instead, he listened to the people. Now, this is my point. You can't confirm with flesh and blood. People will talk you out of it. If God tells you to do something, don't let people talk you out of it. And so the prophet came back to Saul and said, Saul, I told you to kill everything. Oh, he said, I listened to the people, and we saved the best for sacrifice. Samuel said, obedience is better than sacrifice. Now, there's times people would rather give money to God than give them their self. I'll tell people, God would rather have you as your money. So you have to be careful that it's not just a way to give part of yourself, the monetary, and not give yourself. And so Saul said, I have sinned. And he did, because he listened to people. You can, see, I got off into this one time, and you can do good things. And one time I had two warehouses and a big storage, or three. Actually, there's three types of warehouses. And I was feeding the poor, but I got so busy hauling food and feeding the poor and so forth that I worked myself down, almost worked myself to the frazzle, neglected my preaching ministry. It was a good work, but God didn't tell me to do it. I just saw an opportunity to do something good, and I thought God would. You have to be careful, because God hadn't called you to do everything. It brings to mind that one man that went to Rhema, and he went there, and the Lord told him, all he said was, help Brother Hagin. And so the next 30 years, he helped Brother Hagin. You don't, when God tells you something, he may not tell you anything for another 5-10 years. I mean, if you just do that, God is a man of few words. And so, help Brother Hagin was what he told him. Speaking of Brother Hagin, Kenneth E. Hagin, God told him to start a healing school. And so I think it's 2 years later, he started the healing school. And they got the praise and worship, and stuff going, and it wasn't going like it should. And he sought the Lord about it. And the Lord said, I didn't tell you to have singing. See, sometimes we just take things for granted. He said, have a healing school. And see, now this is important to God. There's nothing wrong with singing, nothing wrong with praise and worship, but that's not what he told him to do. Feeding the poor, that was good. That wasn't what God told me to do. And so you have to be careful. Even though your heart is good, you want to do good, don't add to it, and don't take away. The simplest thing is stay right with what God tells you. So after Saul's rejected, you'll find this in the 16th chapter, God tells Samuel to go over to anoint one of Jesse's boys to be king. So they brought Eliab in first. He's tall, dark, handsome. God said no. Brought the next one. No, that's not him. That's not him. God didn't tell him who it was. He told him who it wasn't. So he went through this process of elimination. Sometimes you don't know all what to do. There's times in Paul's life, he didn't know. He wanted to go over to Macedonia. He wanted to go over here. He wanted to go over here, Bithynia. And the Lord said, don't go over there. And finally, in a dream, he go over here. So you have to, God has specific instructions. That's what I'm getting at. Learn to follow instruction. Don't try to be a jack of all trades. Do what he's told you to do. So Samuel goes over to Jesse's house, runs through all 7 boys. Don't you have anybody else? I've got one out in the field, David. He's ruddy complected. He's what do you call a pretty boy, like a mama's boy. Tender, nice looking. He didn't look like a warrior. He didn't look like a king, per se. And God says, listen, I don't look on the outside. I look on the inside. Man looks on the outside, but I look on the inside. Following the inside, obeying that inward witness is extremely important as you go through life. And you need, if you can't obey the written word, you're sure not going to obey what the Spirit says. When the Spirit talks, that's still the word from God. Faith comes by hearing. And so, but if you can't love your brother, if you can't go to church, if you can't do the written word, how are you going to do the spoken word through the Spirit? And that's what we're talking about today. Faith to obey instructions. And so he goes over there and anoints David to be king. Now, then David goes back to watching the sheep. A few days later, he takes some food down to his brothers in the battle. And you know the story, he kills Goliath. But before he kills Goliath, Saul puts pressure on David to wear his armor and so forth. And David, we're all human, and we tend to want to please people. But you have to be careful pleasing men and not pleasing God. And he put on this armor. Well, Saul's 9 foot tall. He's pretty good size. He said, I can't wear this. I haven't proved it. You can only do what's proven in your life. And so what David used was the slingshot. It wasn't the armor of Saul. It was the slingshot. He had been used to that. He had proven that. And so today I just want to say something to you that's simple. There's times I've seen God just say something very simple, and it turned out to be dynamic. For example, We operate in the office of prophet, and there's times God will tell me things, and I'm thinking, and I may even do it in jest or with humor, like, go home, pray for their stomach, and I say, go home, eat a bowl of chili. Well, really, if that's God talking, that's what they should do. God told through the prophet to Naaman, go dip in Jordan. Now, just analyze this for a moment. His thought life was, well, we got clean rivers where I come from. Why would I go dip in a muddy river? His servant said to him, Naaman, if he had told you something hard, you would have done it. Oftentimes, what God tells you is simple and it's easy. My yoke is easy, my burden is light. There's people that want to go to Africa and have great crusades and cast out devils, but they won't go to church and clean the toilet. They won't park cars. If you won't do the simple stuff, you won't do the tough stuff because you won't have the character to hold you there. And so he said, now, he told him to go dip in Jordan 7 times. He had to cross Jordan to go home. And so it wasn't that hard. He could have said, go stand on Mount Carmel, hold both hands in the air, and crow like a rooster. But that ain't what he said. He said, go to Jordan, dip 7 times. If he'd have dipped 5 times, he wouldn't have got it. If he'd dipped 6 times, he wouldn't have got it. Simple faith to obey simple instruction. Sometimes we try to add to. Oh, it's so hard. It's just so hard working for God. No, it's the easiest thing in the world. People make it hard. But it's the easiest thing in the world if you lay your reasoning down and walk by that inner voice. Easiest thing in the world. The challenge is when God tells you something, it don't sound reasonable. Oral Roberts is one of my faith heroes. And the biggest flack that he caught from the church world was not on healing. No, it wasn't. His biggest flack that he caught from the church world is saying that God is a good God. Did you know in that day and time, so the most famous messages was that God's a killer, and God will crush you, and God will break you, and God will get your ties from you. You have to break your leg, or your car break down, he'll get those ties. And see, all that was in error. And so when he would come out and preach God's a good God, and something good is going to happen to you today, he caught a lot of flack. So if he would let people persuaded him not to do that, then we would leave where we're at today. One of the reasons we have the teaching wave and the faith wave and the grace wave and the outpouring of the Spirit is because some of our forefathers blazed the trail with controversial subjects. And one of them was God is a good God and expect a miracle, expect something good today. And so he heard those words down inside. I heard the story how that he purchased ORU, the land for ORU. See, in his day, when God told him to build him a university, that was unheard of. That was unheard of. God will tell you things, and if you go to a board or a council and say, what do you think about this? They'll say, man, what are you talking about? I build you a university? God's not into schooling. Well, God was into schooling. God did mix faith with medicine. God is not against doctors. God is not against medicine. A lot of people's faith is not up there to where they can receive. And if they don't go to the doctor, they're liable to die. And so you can only operate on what level of faith you are. God wants to help you no matter what level you're at. Remember, we're teaching these faith classes for a reason. The just shall live by faith. This should be a lifestyle. And you learn it and you practice it. You do it. You ever notice that life is repetitious? You get up to go to bed. You go to bed to get up. Day after day. You do some of the same things over and over and over. Well, with faith, it's the same thing. You overcome, and I don't like to use money all the time because they think, like myself, I was a little gun shy about preaching on prosperity because I cared what people would think. But doesn't everybody need prosperity? So the only way to believe for prosperity is hear it preached on prosperity. So I neglected God on not preaching what I should, and so we're going to try to make up for that a little later on. But here's my point. Don't let people confer not with flesh and blood. Whatever God tells you to do. And when I first started this ministry, 40 some odd years ago, the Lord told me to join myself to certain ministries, and we have supported those ministries for 45 plus years. And as far as I know, unless God tells me to quit, I'll just keep supporting them and just keep supporting them. It's working. It's working. I'm faithful. God is faithful. And so you don't have to have a great skywriting word in the sky to do something. It'll usually be a still small voice on the inside. Do this, do this, do this. And when you start learning to trust that, that is faith to follow instructions. Faith to follow instructions. And so be encouraged today. This is faith class number 9. You'll as you go through life, you'll have some setbacks. You'll have some setbacks. You'll have some encounters with God and some encounters with the enemy. And so you're the person in the middle. And so let's reiterate one more time. What was the key to success, Oral Roberts? Stay small in your own eyes. Hear from God. Confer not with flesh and blood. Get your job done at any cost. What was the problem with the young prophet and the old prophet? Kings 13. God told him, don't eat bread. Don't drink water. Go home another way. That is so simple. So simple. Don't eat bread. I mean, you don't have to look that up in the dictionary. Don't eat bread. Don't drink water. And go home a different way. What did he do? Let another prophet, so-called, that lied to him, persuade him, and he disobeyed God. And so it's simple. Just follow what God says. Confer not with flesh and blood. Get your job done at any cost. Let me reiterate one more time. The just shall live by faith. It's a lifestyle. It's not a credit card or a debit card or a raincoat to get you out of trouble. It should be a way of life. So this is faith class number 9. Faith to follow instruction. There is a faith that comes from the Spirit called the gift of faith. Now, we may touch this on our next lesson, but I'm talking about common faith, saving faith,